If we look at funding sources for our part-time students, essentially it's very much the same. About half of the entering class in our part-time division received some scholarship based upon the strength of their application. The average award for our part-time students was around $10,000 a year. But it could range anywhere from about $3,000 to close to $20,000 a year as a part-time student. Again, the same federal loans are available to you as a part-time student. The Stafford loan, which allows you to borrow up to $20,500 a year, or the Grad Plus if you need additional funding. As I indicated, the Grad Plus is a credit-based loan, so we'll talk a little bit about that later. A number of our evening students receive tuition benefits through their employers, and that's a really important resource to explore if you're not certain about whether you might be eligible for that benefit. And then a number of our evening students are also receiving veteran educational benefits. At this point in the process, you have to think about the big picture, and there really are three distinct stages to financing a legal education. The planning that you do prior to enrolling in law school, then what you consider, or at least maintaining your expenses while you're in law school, and then finally the post-graduation repayment options. And for our discussion this evening, I'm going to primarily focus on the kinds of things that you can do now to put you in the best position if you become a student this fall. And the obvious one is to save money. I sort of jokingly tell students in the admission process, if you're thinking about law school, you should do two things. You should establish a savings account just for law school now. Put aside as much money as you can that will help you defray the expense of your books, of transportation, of some of the things, the necessities that you need as a student. And the other thing is to tell all of your family and friends from this point on any gifts that they wish to give to you for birthdays or holidays or whatever need to come in the form of cash. Not gift cards, not fancy wrapped packages, but cash, because that you have the most flexibility of how you can use those funds to help reduce the amount of loans that you take out once you become a student. The Department of Education has very strict guidelines as to what schools can use as components in a student budget. And so things like revolving credit card debt or car payments were not permitted to include in your student budget. So it's important for you to use this time between now and when you start law school to pay off as many of the outstanding balances that you have with that kind of debt before you come to law school. I also suggest that you take a look at your credit history. If you haven't done this already, there is a website out there that will allow you to pull a credit report for free 3 times a year from each of the 3 different credit bureaus. And that website is annualcreditreport.com. It's important for you to look at that report to see if there's erroneous information on your credit report, or as we've seen, especially this year, I probably had a half a dozen students who had very minor debts or negative credit history, a medical bill that they thought was paid that they didn't realize was still outstanding, that was very easy for them to resolve, but it stood in the way of their being approved for any credit-based student loans. So I would suggest that you take a look at that and work through any information. To also look to see if there are credit accounts on your report that are open, but they're not accounts that you use any longer. And if that's the case, to go ahead and contact them and close those accounts. And finally, I know that nobody really enjoys doing this, but it's really important for you to get an idea of exactly how much you need for your living expenses. And so I would encourage you to spend a month or so tracking your expenses, your living expenses, because if you don't know how much you need to live on, you will borrow more than you need. And if you borrow more than you need, you will pay more than you need to once you go into repayment of your student loans. So those are all the kinds of things that you can do at this point in the process to put yourself in the best position once you enter law school.